Pandemic served as an inspiration for an Iowa artist. In fact, you can see her work on display at Western Iowa Tech in Sioux City. The display, titled Folding Cranes and Folding Communities, started in 2020 when Pamela Douglas of Clive was quarantined. As an artist, Douglas wanted to communicate her empathy for those who died from COVID through art by folding paper cranes.
I chose the crane for this work because its broad wingspan carries significant symbolism in other cultures. The crane travels thousands of miles on migration. It's believed to be a strong bird, and it's believed that it can carry an individual from Earth to paradise.
By the end of the pandemic, she'd folded nearly 11,000 of the paper cranes. Each one is a unique pattern or color representing someone lost during the pandemic. Some of the names and hometowns of Iowans who died are on them. The cranes have migrated all over Iowa, starting in Des Moines, then Dubuque, and eventually here to Sioux City.
From the beginning, what I've tried to do is approach those areas that have lost the most victims to COVID, or those counties that have lost the most victims. And of course, Sioux City was one of those, Woodbury County. And then the last 4 areas are the areas that I haven't been to yet.
While no longer folding those cranes of her own, Douglas continues to pass on her expertise in the art of origami by teaching her audiences how to fold their own.